What would you learn about deer hunting if you sat down with a man who killed his first deer at age 7 inches, 1,955, and has not stopped hunting a single season since? Because I did that last fall in central Alabama, and the 3 hours I spent in that man's living room, surrounded by mounts on every wall, going back to the 1960s, changed more about how I hunt than the previous 10 years of YouTube videos, magazine articles, and forum threads combined. He started killing squirrels for the dinner table at 6 years old because his grandfather told him the family needed meat. He shot his first deer, a spike buck feeding on white oak acorns, with a .22 rifle through the ear at roughly 15 yards, about the distance across a 2-car garage, because that is how his grandfather taught him to kill hogs and goats. Clean, one shot, through the ear canal. He was 7. Deer were so scarce in that part of Alabama in the mid-1950s that most families in the county had never seen one. He hunted the next 10 years before he saw another buck worth shooting. Everything I am about to share came from that conversation. I wrote 11 pages of notes. If you have hunted with an old-timer who taught you something that no magazine or video ever covered, I want to hear what it was. Stay until the end, because the last piece of advice he gave me is the one that contradicts what every modern hunting channel teaches about how to approach a big buck. And it is the reason his wall has more mature bucks on it than most hunting lodges. The first lesson is about food, and it starts with a sentence that should make every hunter who runs a corn feeder uncomfortable. He told me that deer will walk past a pile of shelled corn to eat acorns off the ground every single time the oaks are producing. He has cameras on both. His corn feeders go untouched for weeks when the white oaks are dropping. The acorns win, not sometimes, every time. And not all acorns are equal. He tastes the acorns on his property every fall before he hangs a stand. White oaks that produce sweeter, less bitter acorns, meaning lower concentrations of tannic acid, draw heavier deer traffic than white oaks with bitter acorns 50 yards away. Same species of tree, same ridge, different taste, different deer traffic. He finds the sweet tree by cracking an acorn with his teeth and spitting it out. If it is mild, almost nutty, that tree is the one. If it makes his mouth pucker, the deer have a better option nearby. I tested this on my own property the following week and found 3 white oaks within 80 yards of each other, roughly the distance from home plate to the outfield wall. One had 14 piles of deer droppings under it. The other 2 had 2 piles between them. I tasted an acorn from each tree. The popular tree was noticeably milder. The unpopular trees were bitter enough to make me reach for my water bottle. He has been doing this since the 1970s. I have been hanging stands over the wrong oaks for 20 years. He also mentioned persimmons, which are a fruit tree native to the southeast that produces small orange-brown fruit in late fall. The old-fashioned canyon pear, as he called it, is the one that hangs on the tree into hunting season because the fruit is hard. Modern pear varieties drop their fruit too early. But the old hard pears that grow on abandoned homestead sites deep in the timber hold their fruit through November. He finds old home sites in the woods by looking for non-native fruit trees standing alone in mature timber. If you find an apple tree or a pear tree 200 yards from the nearest road in the middle of hardwood forest, there was a house there 80 years ago, and the deer know about that tree even if you do not. He told me something about deer diet that I flat out did not believe until I went home and researched it. He has watched whitetails eat dead fish off the bank of a drought-drained pond. He has watched them eat dead birds off the ground. He has watched them lick and chew at the gut pile of a field-dressed deer within hours of the kill. Whitetails are classified as herbivores, but they are opportunistic consumers of animal protein when mineral deficiency drives them to seek calcium and phosphorus from non-plant sources. Research from Mississippi State University's Deer Lab has documented whitetails consuming bird eggs, small mammals, and fish carcasses in trail camera footage, confirming that this behavior is not folklore. It is rare, but it is real. The old man saw it with his own eyes 40 years before trail cameras confirmed it. He told me something about red oaks that I had never heard from any source. Red oak acorns contain significantly more tannic acid than white oaks, which is common knowledge. But deer still eat them. The difference is timing. Deer eat red oaks after the first hard frost, because freezing temperatures break down the tannic acid compounds in the acorn shell and reduce the bitterness. Before frost, the same red oaks sit untouched. After frost, the deer are on them within days. If you are hunting red oaks in October, before your area has had a hard freeze below 28 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly -2 Celsius, you may be hunting trees that the deer are not using yet. Wait for the frost, then check the red oaks. This man knew this in 1975 from watching deer behavior. Quick pause here. Everything I just walked through, and 100 more tricks like it, is sitting inside the Buck Hunter's Bible, 2026 edition. 280 pages of the stuff that actually puts deer on the ground. And right now, if you grab it, I am throwing in the 3-0 day opening day roadmap completely free. That is a 60-page day-by-day preseason plan that walks you from the first scout to opening morning, so you start this season ahead of every other hunter in the woods. Link in the description, QR code on screen. This is the season you stop guessing. The second set of lessons is about where big bucks actually live, and this is where his experience contradicts almost everything you see on hunting shows. He said a heavy, well-worn deer trail with deep tracks going both directions is a doe trail. Mama deer and her fawns and the young bucks use those highways. If you hang a stand over a highway trail, you will kill does and 2-year-old bucks all season. That is fine if that is your goal. But if you want a mature buck, you have to leave the highway and find the faint trails. He described them as barely visible paths, sometimes just a slight impression in the leaf litter, running through the thickest cover on the property, not the edges. Not the travel corridors between food and bedding, the thickets. He hunts inside the thicket, not on the edge looking in. He said mature bucks in pressured timber live their entire lives in cover so thick that most hunters cannot walk through it without making noise. The bucks use those faint trails to slip out at last light and slip back in at first light. They rub trees on the perimeter of the thicket, and the rubs tell you which direction the buck is traveling. If 4 trees in a row are rubbed on the same side, the buck is moving that direction. Rubs on the south side of 4 trees means the buck is heading south out of the thicket toward a food source that direction. He finds the rub line, follows it backward into the thicket, and sets up 100 yards inside the cover, roughly the length of a football field, where no other hunter would go. He cautioned me about one assumption that cost him a big buck early in his career. He assumed that a tree rubbed raw on a trunk, 4 to 5 inches in diameter, roughly the thickness of a fence post, was made by a mature buck. He passed on a deer that came in and rubbed the same tree in front of him because the buck was a small-framed 8-point with a basket rack, not the bruiser he expected. He waited 2 more weeks for the big buck that he was certain had made those rubs. The same small 8-point came back and rubbed the same tree. The big rubs were made by a deer with an 1-8-inch inside spread, not a deer with a 2-2-inch spread. He killed the 8-point that evening and learned that rub size does not reliably predict antler size. A 3-5-year-old deer with average antlers and an aggressive temperament can shred a 5-inch tree the same way a 5-year-old with a wide rack can. He told me to stop reading rub diameter as a buck size indicator and start reading rub lines as direction of travel indicators. That single shift in thinking changed how he approached thicket edges for the rest of his career. He told me that cedar thickets are the single best big buck habitat in the southeast. Better than pine plantations. Better than clear-cut regrowth. Better than hardwood hollows. Cedar trees provide thermal cover in winter because the dense evergreen canopy holds heat and blocks wind. The ground under a mature cedar stand is carpeted with dry needles that insulate the deer's bedding area from frozen soil. He described finding cedar thickets with so much buck sign inside them, rubs, scrapes, beds, droppings, that the thicket floor looked like a barnyard. But no other hunters ever went in, because the cedars are too thick to walk through comfortably and too short to provide good visibility from a tree stand. He hunts them from the ground. He crawls in. He clears a small shooting window with hand pruners and sits against a tree trunk with branches pulled around him. He has killed more mature bucks from the ground inside cedar thickets than from any tree stand he has ever owned. I do not have cedars on my property, but I have a 3-acre stand of young planted pines that I have never hunted because they are too thick to see through. After hearing this, I crawled in on hands and knees and found 6 rub trees, 2 scrapes, and a bedding depression with droppings the size of my thumb inside 200 yards, roughly 2 football fields, of pine thicket that I had walked past for 8 seasons without entering. The big bucks were in there the whole time. I was hunting the edges. He said something about droppings that I had never considered. Large droppings clumped together in a single pile, roughly the size of a golf ball cluster, indicate a mature buck. Small pellets scattered individually indicate does and fawns. He reads droppings the way I read trail camera photos. He has been doing it since before trail cameras existed, because droppings were the only data he had. He scouts thicket perimeters in late summer, looking for 3 specific signs that most hunters walk past. The first is rubs on the outer edge of the thicket that tell him a buck is traveling between the thicket and a food source. The second is droppings inside the thicket concentrated in bedding depressions. The third is dried blood droplets on honeysuckle leaves and low vegetation at the thicket edge. In summer, deer flies and horse flies bite the ears and face of bedded deer. The deer shake their heads to dislodge the flies and fling blood droplets onto nearby vegetation. Finding dried blood spray on honeysuckle leaves 2 to 3 feet off the ground, roughly waist height, at the edge of a thicket in August means a deer has been bedding within 10 yards of that spot, about the length of a pickup truck. I had never heard of using fly blood as a scouting indicator from any other source. When he hunts from the ground inside a thicket, he does not use a commercial ground blind. He crawls in, clears a small area against a tree trunk, and arranges cut branches and natural brush around his position. He sits motionless with his back against the trunk and his weapon across his knees. Look, I am going to be straight with you. Everything I am walking through in this video is just a small piece of what is inside the Buck Hunter's Bible, 2026 edition, 280 pages, 101 field-tested tricks. And right now, you also get the 3-0 opening day roadmap free with it. A 6-0 page day-by-day plan that gets you ready before the season even starts. I do not know how long that bonus stays in the deal, but if you have been watching these videos and thinking this could be my season, that is the move. Link in the description below, QR code on screen. Make this the year. No chair, no stool, just the ground and the tree. He said the key to ground hunting in thick cover is to stop moving completely. A deer walking through thick brush at 15 yards, roughly the distance across a large bedroom, cannot distinguish a motionless human shape against a tree trunk from the rest of the undergrowth. But one head turn, one arm adjustment, and the deer picks up the movement instantly. The third set of lessons is about rattling, and this man is more committed to antler rattling than anyone I have ever met. He told me he does not hunt without rattling antlers, ever. He carries them every single sit from the first day of the season to the last. He does not tickle the tines gently. He crashes them together, stomps the ground with his boots, and rakes nearby brush. He said most hunters rattle too quietly because they are afraid of scaring deer. He rattles like 2 bucks are trying to kill each other, because that is what a real fight sounds like, and that is what triggers a response from a mature buck that thinks his territory is being challenged. He described 3 ways a buck responds to rattling. The first is the sneaker. He comes in slow, tiptoeing, nose to the ground, trying to circle downwind before committing. You will not hear him. You will see him when he is already at 30 yards. The second is the trotter. He comes in at a steady pace, slightly agitated, head up, looking for the fight. You will hear him coming through brush at 60 to 80 yards. The third is the charger. He runs in at full speed, stops, and stands there bristled up, looking for something to fight. This one will scare you the first time it happens. He said the charger is the most dangerous because if he does not find another buck to fight, he may charge your decoy, your rattling antlers, or you. He has had 3 deer charge him after being shot. One of them required him to grab the buck by the antlers and use a knife because the animal would not go down. He was clear about this. If you approach a downed deer and it is still alive, do not grab it from behind. Walk around to the front and check the eyes. If the eyes are still tracking movement, that deer can still hurt you. Antler tines through a thigh or a forearm is a hospital trip. He also said something about mature buck vocalizations that contradicted my assumptions. I expected big bucks to grunt loudly. He said the biggest bucks he has killed made the quietest sounds. a soft, almost inaudible grunt. He described it as sounding like a phone vibrating on a table, not the aggressive loud grunt that commercial grunt tubes produce. The biggest, oldest bucks are quiet. The loud grunters are usually 2 to 3-year-olds trying to act tough. He shared one more piece that fits between the rattling and the final lesson, and it is about choosing which does to harvest. He never kills a doe that has fawns with her. He watches the food plots at dusk and identifies the old, solitary does that have been kicked out of the family group. He described them as rough-looking, heavy-bodied, with scarred ears and patchy coats. They come into the food plot alone. They do not look back over their shoulder because nothing is following them. A young doe with fawns looks back constantly because her young are behind her. The old doe walks in alone, head down, feeding. He shoots the old does and leaves the mothers. His reasoning is practical. Every fawn a mother doe raises is a potential buck on the property in 3 years. Kill the mother, and you kill the future buck production from that doe's genetics. Kill the old barren doe, and you remove an animal that is consuming resources without producing anything. He has followed this rule for decades, and his property consistently produces mature bucks despite heavy doe harvest in the surrounding area. He also told me about making his own scent from harvested deer, and the method is so simple that it makes commercial scent products feel like a scam. Every time he killed a buck, he extracted the urine from the bladder with a syringe and stored it in a glass jar. He cut the tarsal glands, which are the dark, waxy patches on the inside of a deer's hind legs at the hock joint, and dropped them into the urine. He kept the jar in a deep freezer and added to it with every kill over the season. By the end of 2 or 3 seasons, he had a concentrated blend of real buck urine and tarsal gland secretions that no commercial product could match because it was fresh, unpreserved, and contained the full spectrum of pheromone compounds from multiple bucks. He would apply it to scrapes and rub lines in the weeks before the rut. He said deer responded to his homemade blend more aggressively than any commercial product he ever tested because the commercial products are collected, preserved, diluted, and shipped. His was raw. He started doing this in the late 1960s, decades before companies like Tinks and Code Blue existed. The last lesson is the one I promised at the beginning, and it is the one that goes against every hunting show I have ever watched. He said, when a big buck steps out, you kill him immediately. You do not wait for a broadside shot. You do not film him. You do not admire him. You do not wait for him to turn. The moment you confirm he is the deer you want, you put the crosshairs on him and you shoot. He has killed mature bucks facing him head-on by placing the bullet just below the white throat patch where it enters the chest cavity. He has killed them quartering toward him. He has killed them at angles that every TV hunter would pass on while waiting for the perfect broadside presentation. He said, mature bucks give you 3 to 5 seconds of opportunity before they sense something wrong and leave. Those 3 to 5 seconds are all you get. Every second you spend deciding, adjusting, or admiring is a second closer to watching him walk back into the thicket. The TV hunter gets a second take. You do not. He looked at me when he said it, and his exact point was simple. You can spend all season trying to outsmart them. But when the moment comes, the hunter who hesitates watches the buck leave, and the hunter who is ready fills his tag. Every mature buck on his wall was killed in the first 5 seconds of the encounter. Not one of them gave him a second chance. If you have sat with an old-timer and learned something that no video could teach you, leave it below. Anything you have tried from an older generation that still works, I want to know. Next time we are covering the 5 tree species that predict deer movement on any property and how to identify them without a field guide. That man started hunting in 1955 with a single-shot .22 and a grandfather who taught him to kill through the ear. 70 years later, his walls tell the story. The woods taught him everything. He just paid attention long enough to learn it.